for tomorrow. There are actually two short reflections that I published recently, so it's a little bit my interest to share with you and then maybe to get your comments around that. But it relates to the topic of combative decoloniality, so which is what I'm going to, and it comes back to, remember yesterday we ended with a video from a spoken word performance by Pedro Pietri, Puerto Rican from New York, telling you about the living conditions of Puerto Ricans in New York City. And I hope that you saw the direct linkages that you can make with North Africans in France. But we're going to come back to Puerto Rico tomorrow, right? So in a couple of ways. So for that, I am going to suggest that you take a look at this piece. And this is because tomorrow starts the residence of Benito Martinez Ocasio, aka Bad Bunny, in Puerto Rico. It's a residence given multiple, instead of touring across the world, she will stay in Puerto Rico and then people have to go there. And then he will start the world tour after the residency is over, right? So I wrote a mid-sized piece on the relevance of the residency and how that can be his latest album, and the residency could be put in dialogue with the combative decoloniality that is embedded in Afro-Caribbean music. Now, the piece is originally in Spanish, but actually, you know, if you press one of these buttons here, in whatever browser you are using, a number of them will do automatic English translation, right? And of course, you have to be very careful when you follow it, because, you know, will be whatever kind of, but it helps, I think. Just not take everything at first value. And for example, there are part of the lyrics are intentionally in Spanish, so it translates everything. It translates everything that is easy to translate, even if it shouldn't be translated. So take it with 3 grains of salt. But those of you who speak Spanish and who read Spanish can follow. So this is the piece. Un verano en PR, Bad Bunny y el encantamiento decolonial combativo de la música caribeña. Right? And it actually has a lot to do with music and spirituality too. So if you can check it out tomorrow, then the residency starts tomorrow. People in Puerto Rico are getting crazy, all the media preparing to cover the sensation, right? This is the album. The album got to be first in the global lists. That's what we're talking about, right? It's not in the Latin charts, it's not in Puerto Rico charts, in the global lists, right? So it was between first and second, between Germany, I mean, across the world, many different, so we're talking about kind of a global impact. And I think with a global impact, and this is his latest album, and has been extremely successful, right? So again, this is a reflection of how that links with the theme of combativity too. So yes, you can of course do the combat with the arms and the weapons, but you know, the spoken word piece, the music, the residency, they can become weapons of different kinds in that struggle. The other piece, and this is because in the latest part of this reflection, I focus on the fact, I talked about that there is a significance that the residency is starting 1 week after July 4th. Right? July 4th, 7 days, July 11th. Right? And what is in July 4th? For those of you who are coming from the other shores, right? The day of the independence of the US, right? And I'm thinking that I am proposing that it can be seen not as coincidence that it's starting just 1 week after, especially when the first song of the album makes reference to Puerto Ricans in New York on July 4th. and July 4th almost as a Puerto Rican activity in New York, right? So it speaks to the Puerto Ricanization of July 4th, but that's only a beginning of. And so the residency could be an extension of whatever, right? And this song actually is originally a song from the 70s played by El Gran Combo. So it's like extending almost intergenerational, right? A band from salsa to reggaeton, trap, dembow, and so on. Anyway, take a look. But I'm saying that because it is not, what I say there about July 4th, also relates to the fact that we now enter the countdown to the 250th anniversary of the US independence. 250th anniversary will be next year, right? Already the White House has, even before Trump, they created commissions to organize the celebration of the 250th anniversary. Not only that, then when Trump won the election, his administration directed the federal institutions that provide funding for the arts and the humanities to basically, this is what happened, to take out, remember there is a war against diversity, equity, and inclusion, to remove funding that was dedicated to support artists from minoritized communities and vulnerabilized communities, all the funds for that, because this is DEI, right? Take it away and use that money now, steer it to fund and support events that celebrate the US and that celebrate the 250th anniversary. Right? So I've been thinking about the July 4th and the 250th and the US and the emergence of the US and what it means 1776 also, right? So, and I'm proposing that we can understand, the project, the US project, which is now 250 years, that to understand the significance of those 250 years, we should see it in relation to the 500 years of the system as such, and see it in relationship. And so in that line, I have kind of recently proposed that the US introduces a variation of the coloniality principle. The coloniality principle being a socio-political principle undergirding the project of Western modernity. And the US does a variation of it. They call it the US coloniality principle. Right? I explain what the variation is. But then I think that this variation in 1776 emerges in what then, in the end of the 18th century, remember, was considered to be the frontier of Europe, the frontier, because you're in the Americas, remember? They are taking lands they are still building, growing what became the US. This is the frontier, have a frontier mentality. That is, we are expanding literally the lines, the geographical lines of the West, expanding civilization over the indigenous peoples that we find, right? Creating a new world as we expand these borders. So I argue that it is important then to see what happens in the frontiers. What happens in the frontiers is critical because they see themselves right there, like the front lines of the civilization. In Europe, you are in the middle, in the center, you have another complex of the hybrids of the Europeans, kind of different. We're at the center of it all. But if you are in the frontier, with that, quote, damn Indians, right? And see that this week, a few days ago, Ann Coulter, a massive right-wing fascist ideologue in the US, with some following among neo-Nazis and so on, right? There was a tweet, an X, by someone, person who does indigenous studies, saying something, making a remark about indigeneity and so on, socialism. And then Ann Coulter, this is a few days ago, right? Answer on X, something along the lines, too bad that we didn't kill enough Indians. So that in the frontier, and US is the project of the frontier, particular heavy form, particular fine lethal racism. And as it happens, that what happened in the frontier, that is the country after the Second World War that became kind of global hegemon, somewhat the same. Now, one thing is the frontier of the Western civilization project in the Americas in the late 18th century But I relate that to the other frontier, supposed frontier that has emerged in the Western civilization continuum. One frontier has been the US, and the other frontier is the state of Israel on the other side. So then I write about a third principle, the modern political, modern colonial political Zionist principle. And so this essay about the coloniality principle, the US principle, and the modern colonial Zionist principle are linked to the reflection on Bad Bunny. So they are associated. But that one is already in English. That is short, even shorter than the Bad Bunny one. And so you can find in this page by the Decolonial Research Group. And if you go here on the publications, you see here the US at 250, coloniality and political Zionism in perspectives. This is an outline of the argument. So these two essays are connected. So the combativity that I talked about in the residency is counters not only the coloniality principle, and of course the US coloniality principle, but also the modern colonial, the modern political Zionist principle. Right? So this is, you can download this, and it comes in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and German. Okay? So tomorrow we're going to come back to this as we close and we come back to the notion of combat. Not only a theory of rehumanization, but practices of rehumanization. Okay? Well, in this case, the doctor could be the musician. The doctor can be whoever and whatever is creating the space of combat and creating a situation where co-combatants are emerging. And that's the cure. Right. So, okay, we can remove this out of the way, please. So, now, we're going to break out in groups very shortly. But just as a general overview, very quick, first you started looking at the identification of combat zones where and when there has been an explosion or a proliferation of the decolonial term, right? Different historical moments, different historical conjunctures when that has happened. That's important to know because so many times, how many people you have heard that, oh, what can we do? How can we vanquish capitalism? Right? What can we do? Well, Fanon, the first line in Black Skin, White Mask is the explosion will not happen today, is too soon or too late. Still, there are things that need to be said, right? So whether the explosion happened, capitalism ends or not, something needs to happen. But then when you look at history, there have been moments that may have made a dent and have brought people together. And we need to respect those, right? We need to pay our respects and learn from those without romanticizing or idealize them, not knowing the contradiction, but without failing to learn those lessons and appreciate the achievements of our ancestors, right? So that's what that's there is for, particularly when you're engaged in combat. It's good to know what are the moments that you're going to look to celebrate, to commemorate with others, and why, right? If not, you are left with the 4th of July. So the second day, we focus on the identification of combat zones in the trajectory of Frantz Fanon, right, to account for his view of combative decoloniality. With all his contradictions, I would say that Fanon raised the bar with regards to what it means, to what decolonial engagement means. Right? And it's not that he was the first to do all of that or the only, but we find a particularly strong example of a very comprehensive form of combativity. Now, I remember I was once talking about Fanon and Césaire, particularly with Sylvia Winter, who is a Cuban Jamaican theoretician who have drawn from both in her work. And we were both talking this many years ago, and we were talking enthusiastically, and suddenly she interrupts the conversation, and she tells me, I don't know, I was always curious, why exactly I think the enthusiasm was such that she said, but yes, and Nelson, know that, we cannot be celosas of people like Fanon and Césaire. And I guess that we were so talking about them so highly. And we were not doing it with any kind of jealousy, but in any case, she was saying, we cannot compare. Basically, we're not worthy, we cannot compare, basically. But then she was saying, but let's not forget, they were what I told you at the beginning. They were part of that generation of a time, right? It's a question not only individual people, is that time and what they did in that time, what the possibilities that time opened, and how they engage it. What their generation, remember when Fanon said that every generation needs to discover its mission and then decide whether to fulfill it or betray it? So that each generation counters something. And some generations come to one level, some generations may not, But this was a generation was put under fire, and it produced a lot of heat itself, right? So yeah, they were part of that. So they had these interlocutors, things were changing in this direction. The idea of you do not need to think too hard to be disenchanted of Europe, right? That's already a big advantage. Like remember when I told you about Martinique, that Césaire comes, oh, black is beautiful. But then people were already getting used. If it is not that France gets defeated, maybe they would have come back to normal, right? So again, but once the France is defeated, then again, you don't need to have 2,500 decoloniated schools for a few people to get the sense that, yeah, there are some problems. Everybody, right? Everybody, the grandfather, the grandmother, a lot of people get it. It becomes, that's some other level. And it happens, these figures were part of that context, right? But I think at the same time that when I look more and more about figures like Césaire and Fanon, I cannot avoid thinking, and this is something I propose to you, for you to keep thinking, okay? But as I keep looking at Fanon, other figures, and maybe you can use the notion of part of the black radical tradition or part of any other tradition, I don't know, there's something in Fanon's combative spirit that I think is irreducible to what many of these, even to what Césaire, let's put it between Fanon and Césaire. Aimé Césaire, who had this role, came to Martinique saying, black is beautiful, all of that. But I wonder really if we're going to be serious, to what, as I was saying before, when you live in extremely Eurocentric context, any kind of anti-Eurocentrism could look like radical, right? And so, if I say a few things that are anti-Eurocentric, I come out as the most radical intellectual, right? Well, how far is that really going? How deep is really? If you're measuring from the insanity of the system, that seems to be, like when Césaire, he was considered to be mad, crazy. That's, even this is so strange. But really, from that point of view, yes, it's a big achievement to come and bravery, and that this professor comes and does this. But from another angle, you say, okay, but what was missing in that effort of that project? What was missing? And what I think that Fanon is suggesting is that without the concrete engagement and solidarity of people involved in the struggle, with others involved in the struggles in different sectors of society, without building from the grassroots and from the ground, the project will be limited. And sooner or later, it will find its ceiling, right? And perhaps, we could discuss whether that applies to Césaire or not and so on, but I think that what I'm saying is that one thing is decolonization as a form of anti-Eurocentrism, Another thing is to think about decolonization as the actual formation of collectives who come together to combat specific institutions, right? And the coming together is like the Zapatistas say, the Zapatistas put it down and to the left, like it has to be built down. So if we're going to do it, we're going to do it with the indigenous communities that are living in the mountains, right? It's not simply in the national, in the UNAM, right? Where the philosophers are. Israeli, from the mountain, from there, you get the orientation, then you do it with that, a part of the movement, and you begin to create another world, right? That's more like the kind of, I think, the more Fanonian vein. But there is a difference between the two, between performances of anti-Eurocentrism and dictums of anti-Eurocentrism, and ways of knowing and thinking and developing the ideas and the tools and the practices that lead to the formation of collectives that, right? So I don't know. I mean, so we need to figure out a way to maybe differentiate, and we don't want to create a kind of a Bible and terms to, but at the same time it has become too easy to say decolonial and then everything is decolonial, right? So I don't know. I have thought that maybe we can think of decoloniality light and combative decoloniality, right? I don't know if academic decolonization, some people say, right? In Fanon begins to explore this, and the nomenclature that I take from what he says is we need to think about the pre-combative, maybe the proto-combative, and the combative. And I think that many of the people that within the colonial thinkers today, at most, will fall into the proto-combative. So what I'm saying is that with all his faults and his limits and contradictions, I see that what Fanon's project, this trajectory and his work is putting forward, when I say raising the bar, he's making us to think about decoloniality as something quite different. Not something that we can say, yes, this is the ex-radical tradition, because in that radical tradition, there's so many. No. And Fanon saw this when he went to Paris and he went to Rome to meet black writers who were meeting, right? And he was there as a black writer himself, but also as someone, as a militant of the Algerian National Liberation Front. So he goes there to look solidarity for support for the struggle, not only in Algeria, but for the Pan-African struggle against colonization. And he was considered to be only, part of the most radical faction of that group. So there were other, black writers in that group, right? Pursuing other questions, right? In fact, there is a scholar. She passed away not too long ago when she was a student. I think she was from Belgium, but she taught in Paris. And she was interviewed, and she's saying that she met Fanon when he was in Paris, and that she tried to establish a conversation with him, right? And so she went to him, and he was kind of stern and very serious. But then that Fanon asked her, so what do you do? And she said, well, my project is about African literature and looking at these authors and this author, And it's a kind of a project that even today, in any given program in French literature, if you are in a French studies department, maybe that dissertation project will be considered radical, right? Because this French, to be a deep anti-black racism in the French studies institution as a whole, right? I mean, not targeting on the French, the same is true probably of the other languages. So yes, that kind of dissertation, that you're taking authors that are ignored and you're giving them these two, right? These are as literary figures. So, and she said that Fanon had one-line response. And I know that this could sound crude, excessive, but take it simply as a clue to something, okay? And remember, he was there in the conversation. We are not privy to whatever he heard. His answer was, remember, he was there, recruiting, the struggle is happening, the struggle. His answer was irrelevant. So what I'm saying is that combating decoloniality is just not anything, right? It's not just you now preparing this dissertation project that is going to challenge this part of your discipline, and not that could not contribute in some way, right? There's nothing, not that better that than the opposite, right? But then be careful also, because sometimes the very people who do that, then later see themselves as the ones who are doing this, and are the very first ones that whenever other possibilities emerge, they cut them. Because they are protecting their field, they're protecting the space. So sometimes they can be more dangerous than the ones that do not even pay attention to all of this. And that's the danger even of having decoloniality schools. Because we cannot be responsible what you do with this, how you employ it, right? I mean, it turns, right? Every year says it's a turn. You're going to do, you don't know what they're going to do with it. This idea that everyone is learning and thinking that's good, no. No. So you saw it, so we can have doctors and academics who are producing their own theory of inhumanity, even using texts that are supposed to be decolonial. So I just wanted to preface it with that, kind of reviewing, coming back, and then I asked you to please look at the text, the North African Syndrome, and to provide your responses to what this outline of a theory of inhumanity is, right? Fanon describes it, he provides 3 theses. What do you make of that? And your answer could have been, this is what I think Fanon was, this is what I think Fanon meant by the theory of inhumanity, and then you say it in your words. Or it could be, I was particularly struck by the second thesis, this question, and then it's a commentary. I told you also it could have been a painting, it could have been a creative expression, it could have been anything. I hope that at least some of you do it. I know that this is very compressed and that you come out here at night, so I don't have every interpretation that all of you were. Now let me go back to the text and read it. But probably some of you did. And so what I wanted to do is, since I've been announcing it, now dividing you in groups and asking you, maybe 5 of you in each group or so, to share how do you approach the answer to that question? How do you approach it? What do you make of it? And that then your group decides what would your group would like to present to all of you, right? So you will be the initial filter in a way, right? You will, be respectful with each other, but if something is not clear or is entering into problematic territory, say, maybe we should put that on the side for the moment and just focus on what you think or you all agree will be something good to put forward, to present, okay? Still, we may hear something that we don't like, okay? But if you all agree, we're gonna say we're doing our best to get some of our, so pedagogically we can address something that if maybe it's not the kind of response that we think, right? That we can, if we do it with, and everyone do it with humility, and you go there, and the group decides as a whole, and then we generously received, and we comment, and we still have tomorrow, right? If something still needs to be commented, I can also think it overnight and come tomorrow with something more, kind of bringing the pieces together, okay? So don't get too desperate, things going one direction or the other. We're still coming back tomorrow, talking about combating decoloniality and closing the discussion of this text and going into Bad Bunny, and maybe there will be some dancing in the room, I don't know. Not by me. Ramon is the dancer in the school. But Ramon dances salsa. I don't know if you are doing reggaeton. It would be interesting. You can do some perreo. Perreo combativo, yeah. Yes, that's there. That's there. So maybe I was thinking I can divide it. How many folks are now? Maybe I can see 8 groups of 5 or 40, right? Let's say 8 groups in total, maybe 5 or 6. And the idea is that then you go outside maybe for 15, 20 minutes at most, and then we call you in, okay? We'll give you a 5 minutes warning so that you can begin to wrap up. So we can also leave the room for a second and then get refreshed. Okay, so I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then all of the ones meet somewhere, right? All of the ones, maybe we can to facilitate, right? Maybe when you go out of the building, you turn left. Extreme left is number 1, right? Group number 1 will be there. When you come out of the building, to the left. Then group number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, right? More or less say on the 8, you divide it, you still have to do the start, but at least you know. If you are in the first 3, you go in that direction. If you are in the last 3, you go in this direction. If you are in the middle 3, you go to the middle. And then you find your group, okay? So 1 to 8, and then after we're done, you can all walk and find your number, other people in your number. Cool? Understood? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1. Okay?